Hi guys, welcome to Concept Z Performance, and today we are going to be showing you how to install some subframe bushings. This is going to be pretty much the same thing in all of your Nissan vehicles, 350s, G35s, G37, even GTRs, and S chassis use very similar rear subframe bushings, so we're going to be showing you how to do that today. This is the factory bushing, roughly 16 years of heat and dry air. I think this car was in California for a while. We now have it in Arizona. Bushings in these climates just don't last. So this is 15 years old, and that one is really bad. Quite like I can move it with my hand, should not be able to do that. And this one is almost there. It's starting to crack right here. And then once these two are gone, the fronts, which will then be holding the majority of the stress, will go quickly after. And then you're shifting around, you're wondering what's clunking in your back or what's squeaking. It's your subframe bushings. You can't really tell when it's up in the car. This subframe looked straight. There were no obvious signs that these are bad, but just after 15 years of holding the subframe up, the bushings just rot and dry out and need to be replaced. This bushing consists of a metal inner race, a rubber center, and then a metal outer race that's actually in like the subframe. It's pressed into the subframe. So we have to get the rubber out as well as this thin metal outer race, and it was pressed in from the top this way and has a lip, so we pretty much have to take it from the bottom and pop it out that way. All right, to get started, here are the tools you're going to need: some heavy duty chisels, a hammer, a drill, some drill bits, and some optional tools would be a hydraulic press and a sawzall or reciprocating saw. I'm just gonna throw a 1/4-inch bit and pretty much drill through the remaining bits of rubber. So it's pretty well cracked, but like yours might not be.
You just want to make sure you drill out all the remaining rubber. You can kind of barely see it there. But
yeah, so there's rubber here and there on this bushing. Some bushings have it all the way around, some bushings just have it on the sides or on like 4 points. It depends on the manufacturer. But you want to basically get it so where you can remove the inner race and the majority of the bushing. So you get the majority of the material out. You move the inner race, then have to take this pretty much to a bench grinder or whatever and remove all the excess rubber. You can just take it on like a bench grinder that has a brass wire wheel or a stainless steel wire wheel, and it'll just rip all this rubber off real quick. Most bushings don't come with a new inner race. They're gonna tell you to reuse the stock one. Now we chisel out the bushing from the outer race, trying to create a weak spot to fold the bushing in from. Take your time hammering, checking every so often that you're not hammering into the subframe itself. You can see how much of it is folded in to create a weak spot so that the bushing race will come out. There you go. That's one down, one to go. You can see how much of it actually had to be folded in order to get the race removed. Some issues you might run into, like we did, are the drill bit getting stuck or breaking. Don't worry, take your time and remove as much rubber from the bushing as you can. When you're drilling, just be mindful of the inner collar. Don't run into it too much. You can like graze past it, it's fine. Just don't lean into the collar and like grind into it.
we just flipped it over real quick to double check. You want to make sure when drilling that your drill holes go all the way through, which they were not completely because our drill bits are not that long.
Yeah.
So we just flipped it over, made sure we're getting it all out. Because these bushings were actually like in really good condition still, as opposed to the other ones.
You're just removing the rubber that's connecting this inner race to the outer race. Once you get through enough of it, it should just pop through. The more basically gross and like crusty they are, the easier this job should be because it'll kind of crumble apart. These ones are surprisingly malleable still. Alright. Yep. Jeez, that one was way more difficult. With that out, we can do the same as before and get to chiseling. As you can see, even with a chisel, it splits easily. Just take your time and it'll come right out. Now to make this job easier, we're going to be using a Sawzall. As you saw, it's possible to do it without it, but you can get one for pretty cheap from Harbor Freight. Once again, we drill out the rubber part of the bushing and remove the inner race. You want to make sure when you're doing this, this is the weak part of this bushing. This is the strong part of the bushing. You want to make sure when you do the Sawzall, you make your cuts on the strong part. Because then if you do go through and you do nick this, if you nick out here, you have potential of it cracking and like splitting. If you nick over on here, it's not really that big of an issue because you have all this metal welded to it that's like supporting it. But like out here, it's all unsupported and you can mess it up pretty bad. Most people want to stick the Sawzall in where they have like the best angle, which would be like right here. And you could very easily cut straight through or just cut slightly into your bushing or your subframe and damage it.
Then it's game over, man.
Game over. With the Sawzall, I'm clearing away some of the leftover material so I can see the race a bit better. Now I'm going to make cuts on the inside, being careful not to go all the way through. Once the cuts are made, chiseling out the section will become extremely easy. I obviously made my cut deep enough on this side and probably not quite deep enough on that side, but since I was able to get one split all the way along, and when you bend that inwards, it obviously lessens the outward pressure of the whole bushing and it pops right out. Still way less time, obviously.
Yeah.
Way less time and beating. That's pretty much it. This method is so much more convenient. We have one more bushing to go, and then we'll repeat this same process for the dip bushings. All right, so we're going to be installing some white line bushings, which do have an inner race already installed, but a lot of manufacturers actually ask you to reuse the factory inner race, so you'll have to grind the rubber or burn it off and then just reuse the factory one. We put these in the freezer the night before just to get them nice and cold and shrink them down a tiny bit to make them easier to install. If you don't have a press, your best bet would be to call a local shop and see if they can do the install for you. Since we do, this is how we're going to be doing it. So we don't have all the press and receiving cups that you'd actually want with a hydraulic press. So we actually just found some stuff around the shop that is going to work for us. We're using a GTR idler pulley that I took the bolt out of, and then we're using that as a bushing driver. And then we have this, it's actually a fence post driver. for hammering fence posts into the ground, that is acting as our receiving cup, because the bushings actually push through the bottom just a little bit. So you can't block off the bottom with a black plate, or with a flat plate. The bushing actually goes through the race completely. So when you're driving a bushing in, you want to push from the outer flange, but sometimes you're not always able to do that. Sometimes you need to go more on the bushing itself, and that's fine as long as you can disperse the pressure of the press across this really evenly. And this will smush out a little bit, but then once you get enough pressure, it'll actually start driving the metal race down as well. But in a perfect world, you'd be driving it just by the outer race. When you are pressing in bushings, lube is your friend. Good. For the other bushings where we add more space to work, we found these junk rotors for a perfect fit for the race. If you don't want to buy drivers like us, get creative. Oh yeah, that's it. Right there. So if we ever do some more of this, we'll definitely invest in some bushing drivers and receiving cups for our press. But at the low volume we do it, we didn't feel it was necessary. If you guys have any questions on how to do this yourselves, please ask them in the comments below. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. An easy way to make horsepower on an NA car.